Hey there, I'm Kathy with the Traveling Homesteader and Gyroscope Farm, and today you may notice I got strawberries. And so today's job is to be doing strawberries two ways for preservation. So I don't know if you've heard, but there's been a lot of predictions of food shortages. And most recently, I heard that strawberries were going to be in short supply, possibly. Now, I'm not sure, I'm not holding my breath on all the food shortages, but nonetheless, I thought that I would preserve some strawberries two ways, just in case. Now, I like my smoothies, and so I'm going to do one way as just plain frozen strawberries, where I'm going to simply cut them and freeze them, but I'm going to flash freeze them first, and then I'm going to put them in bags. And then the second one is I'm going to do a simple freezer jam. Now, freezer jam is just that. It's jam you have in your freezer, so it's not shelf stable, but it's way tasty. And so the strawberry freezer jam is actually what I've known to use that product. There's a product you add with it to make it happen. And you can actually make it with peaches or with raspberries as well. So I'm going to be showing you the strawberry way because we got the strawberries, but you can make it in two other ways as well. So today, come along and check out how we do preserve strawberries in two different ways. But if you haven't done it already, click the subscribe button and or leave a message down below on what you're preserving this week. So for today, some things that we're going to use for both our freezing and our jam making are as follows. Of course, we're going to use the strawberries, which are a given. Those are the important part for two items that we're going to do. We're going to have a spare container for taking our little green tops off and just helping have an easy spot to dispose of, which means we also need a knife, which is going to be kind of nice to have. This is just a serrated paring knife. That's what I got. It's kind of my favorite knife. So use whatever is good for you. And then we're also going to have, for freezing purposes, I happen to have two metal half sheet pans. I call them half sheets for cake sheets. And so I have two of these to put in my freezer. Along with the freezing aspect, we're also going to use Ziploc freezer bags. I happen to have quart size bags. You can use other sizes as you wish, but make sure you get the freezer bags. And depending on where you are, at least where I am, Ziploc is the only brand that carries some of the smaller bags in the freezer quality. So as long as you get the freezer quality to help prevent freezer burn, that's okay. So it doesn't matter what brand. I happen to have Ziploc. Then for the jam part of things, we're going to need to have a measure cup. This happens to be for 8 cups, but you only actually need to measure 4 cups. So as long as you have that ability to measure out 4 cups at a time, that'll be great. If you even have a 2 cup or 1 cup, as long as you have the ability to put your measured amount into another container, that's what's important. And then we also, for the freezer jam, will need to have some containers. I happen to get these packages of 4 1.5 pint containers. It was just quick and easy to pick up. I was actually looking for another variation that was a little bit smaller because our freezer jam directions say that they have 5 half pint servings. And that's kind of what I was more looking for, since it's just me. Using a smaller size is kind of my preference. But I think this will do. So just realize you'll have to kind of figure out the size difference if you use this sort of thing. And last things last, as you may have seen already, is my blender. And so this happens to be a smoothie blender. And so it's a 2-part blender. So I'm going to use this to blend up my puree, or to make my puree essentially for the jam. So come along, check it out, and see how this turns out. So for the first part, which is completely easy, I'm just going to freeze my strawberries. And all I'm going to do is take my knife, cut off the top. You can see I just left the main part of the bottom. Take the other half or other part and put it in my throwaway bucket, cut my strawberry in half, and place it on my tray. Easy peasy, right? All you gotta do is cut, and place. So this first part, I'm just gonna show you how to do this because you can actually start getting things prepared rather easily all at the same time. Now, you can use frozen strawberries. In this case, there was no top, so I didn't have to cut anything off. With frozen strawberries, you can do a whole host of things. You can use them like for smoothies like I am, or you can even make pie filling later on down the line, or all sorts of things. So having fresh fruit available is really rather nice. But you always want to have the freshest of fruit. Now in this case, my fruit is very ripe, and they're very sweet. And so they're really good fresh too. I'm half tempted to have half of them just to sit down and have a nice snackage of them. But I also want to have a batch in the winter, which is rather important to me. So I can always get some more fresh later. But when we have such fresh fruit, they're bound to go bad quick. So if you're going to do this, make sure you do it as close to the day you buy them or they were picked as possible. Because if you don't, they'll go bad, and you don't want to have bad produce. In my case, I ended up paying just over $31 for this flat of strawberries, and I'd hate to waste my $31 on bad produce that I can't then use. So that's why, if we do this kind of as fast as we can, and so be prepared to take care of this when you get your produce. But as you can see, this is going kind of quick, and you don't want to have any greenery left on your strawberries. But once you get this all filled up, you can just place it right in your freezer. In my case, I have 2 chest freezers, one here and one here. I'm just going to place it right in there to freeze. And at the moment, I have about a half a sheet, so about a quarter sheet of strawberries from just over half a pint. So to give you a little frame of reference, you can probably do about a full pint to a half sheet of pan space, and then that'll kind of give you some measurement. So as you can see, I'm just doing it in halves. You can do it smaller if you need to, but for me, this'll do. Though there are some bigger ones that if you have some bigger strawberries, you may need to cut them down just a little bit more. But easy peasy, cut, place down on the pan. And in some cases, you can kind of overlap a little bit. You don't need too many spaces. You want to make sure that you have enough space in between each of these that they don't get stuck together. And you don't want the strawberry to be wet sides together. So in other words, if you're just going to cut this in half, don't then, once you cut it in half, don't then leave it this way. You may as well not have cut it to then freeze it this way, because it'll be harder for you to then put it in a bag separately. And we're doing this flash freezing so that it'll be easier for you to have the sections of strawberry. And so you don't necessarily have to use a whole strawberry in whatever you're doing. And it'll be easier for you to blend it later if you're going to use it in a smoothie like I am. So, with that in mind, this tray is just about filled. And all I'm going to do is then put it right in the freezer. And I'm going to take just another 1 strawberry. There weren't quite enough strawberries for a full sheet. But then, right there, ta-da! I have a whole pan So I'm just going to push this box of strawberries over and put it in my freezer. Like that. So just as easy as 1, 2, 3. Then I have enough space to put this other pan when I'm ready for it. And there, it's ready to go. So once that's frozen and all done, it'll be about maybe an hour or 2 before it's fully frozen. You can wait an hour or 2. And then you're going to take that off the pan and put it in a freezer bag. Just like that. And then you put it back in the freezer to keep until you use it. So just so you can see how I did another batch of strawberries frozen, this is what it looks like in the bag. Now the only thing that you might do that I didn't do, that I forgot to do actually, is put the contents name and date it was done. That'll help you know when to use it by, because usually it's best to use fruit like this or anything in your freezer within a year after you've put it in there. Now remember, things like meat or cheese or other things that you freeze will have a best by date. And that best by date, if you put something like meat or strawberries in the freezer, can help you extend that life longer. So if there's a sell by date, or say for example, on any given product, whether it's meat or I happen to get something called Cafe Yum, it's a sauce. If you have any sauces that you do that, or cheese, there'll be a date somewhere on the packaging. If you freeze that item like immediately after purchasing, it's usually good up to at least a year after that date if frozen. So keep that in mind. So this is what the strawberries look like after they were flash frozen and in the bag. And it's just kind of handy dandy to have. So that's something to consider. So the next thing we're going to do is the jam, the freezer jam. So for this next part, I wanted to point out for the freezer jam, this freezer jam, although jam is in the name and there will be a type of pectin, you don't process this in the same way that you do other jams. So there are water bath canning jams, or jams that you do in the water bath canner that are shelf stable, that you will use certain other parts. And that includes these lids, the 2-part lids, which are this ring along with this type of lid. So when you put these two together like that on a glass jar and process them for the appropriate amount of time for the size of the jar and the contents, that's a shelf-stable jam. In this case, this is not that same style of processing. It's simply, blend, mix, and put in the freezer. And that's it. So it's a little bit different process. But I have to say, sometimes I find that this is a lot tastier and a lot fresher than the other kinds of jams. Now, depending on what you like, you'll kind of find out for yourself what you like best. Now, I was talking to a friend the other day that I happened to get a gooseberry plant, and I was really glad about that. And I said, I found that gooseberry jam is probably my favorite jam, just because it has a certain tartness to it. Otherwise, most other jams, while easy to make and decent jams, I don't prefer. So that's why this is something that I actually prefer. So remember, when doing this, do something you prefer. If you want to do this method, but say with raspberries, try that out. Do it with raspberries, or with peaches, if that's of interest to you. So remember to do things in the appropriate way for the methods or type that you're doing, and make sure you use the stuff that you like. If you don't like strawberries, don't do strawberries. Try peaches instead for this style of jam. I'm going to start in on the jam, and it's actually rather easy. The only thing I'll point out is that you don't want to measure out the amount of strawberries or the cut, like the physical strawberry in your container. You want to measure the blended version. So it's going to call for, make sure I get so the directions on this particular container say for the no cook freezer jam, right on the back side, I'm just following these directions. it says you're going to need 4 cups crushed fruit, fresh or frozen. 4 cups crushed fresh fruit. That's the important part. And then 1.5 cups sugar or Splenda no-calorie sweetener. And that's where I was thinking about using the monk fruit. So using this monk fruit sweetener. That could probably work, or the sugar that I pointed out at the beginning. And so that's something to consider too. The monk fruit, you can do 1-to-1. The Trevia, I'm not real sure of how it would work out for consistency purposes. Although, if you wanted to do, like, just right off the bat, use it right off the bat and not freeze it, it might work out just fine. But since I haven't used Trevia with this, I am hesitant to pass on anything in definitive. So I'd go with the sugar or the monk fruit since it's equal parts. So 4 cups fresh crushed fruit, number 1. Number 2, 1.5 cups sugar or Splenda, no calorie sweetener. And then last but not least, 1 packet of Mrs. Wage's no cook freezer jam pectin. Now this is considered a pectin, and pectin is going to help thicken your jam. And then all you got to do is cut the tops off and then blend. And then that's it. So let's get to cutting and blending. As I'm cutting these, you'll see I'm putting them in my blender already. Now my blender does have measuring marks on it already, and I'm not cutting these at all, just the tops off. Now my blender, you may or may not see here, has some lines for marking cups. And the top mark on this side is ounces, but on this side is 4.2 cups. Now this is almost to that line up on the top here, but remember, it's not 4.2 cups of whole berries, it's the blended ones. So let's see how much our berries are when they get blended down, because that's the kind of the important part. Now as I'm kind of getting these finished up, I want to point out I'm coming to some berries that are a little on the edge. Now this one in particular is nice and dark and red, and it if I waited until tomorrow, this berry would probably be bad. It's that close, and it's just, these are so tasty and big that they're going to add great flavor. So that's why you want to be sure that you get just the right berries for the job. There's that. And then this last one, we can see if we can put a few more in to see how far it goes. So at the moment, I have just over a pint of berries in there. And so it's maybe 1.5 pints worth of berries. But now that it's about full, that's all I have left in this second container. So now I'm just going to take this and blend it. Now, this particular blender, too, has an added feature of this mixer for frozen items. So that's why it's going to have to kind of stick in. So now that this is all tightened in, we're going to see how far it goes. Now, too, you will blend this according to the texture that you want in the end. If you want it all nice and smooth, you'll just blend it until it's all smooth. If you want to have some chunks of berries, you'll probably not blend it quite as fine. And you can see as I've blended it now, this is quite liquidy and it's quite low. So it's now measuring at about 5 ounces. Let me make sure I got this right. So 16 ounces or 2 cups. So I'm going to add some more. So that's going to be about 4 pints of berries per recipe that we're doing. So approximately. But let's get going and finish this batch up. So I got to just under 4 cups. So I just put in some more berries, going to blend it up, and we're going to get to our next step. So with that last little zip, we're at just the right amount. So now I'm going to take my freshly blended fruits and take out my little top here. So I don't make too much mess. I'm going to put it in my other container. And now I'm going to take my freshly blended fruit and just pour it right in my bowl. Okay, so once that's all done, and you want to make sure you get all that you can out of there. There we go. So then the task is to add 1 package of your pectin. I want to make sure I get this right for us all. It says place prepared fruit into a bowl and crush to desired consistency. So you could do it by hand if you want, or you could just do it like I did in the blender. Easy peasy. So according to the directions, once this is in the bowl, our fruit is in the bowl like we put it in already, we're going to take our pectin and our sugar and put it in a separate bowl. So as we do that, I'm just going to open it up, put it in a separate bowl, and add the sugar. And so according to the directions, it is 1.5 cups sugar. And I happen to have some sugar in my container here that I'll just measure out. And with my handy dandy measure, let's scoop out the amount. So since this is a 1/2 cup, I'm going to put 3 into my bowl. So 1, 2, and 3. So now that that's all done, I'm going to reseal this. And then I'm going to take my high-end stirring utensil, knife, and mix it together. Now, you probably would be wise to use a fork or a spoon in this instance to better mix it. But this will do for now since I didn't bring one, to be honest. So, as I'm kind of stirring this up, I want to make sure that it gets all around. And since they're both the same color, it's going to be rather hard to tell if they're fully mixed or not. But we'll do that and make sure my knife is wiped off. And there we go. It's all mixed up. So once I have my mixed berry, my macerated berries essentially, and my pectin and sugar mixed up, because according to the directions, we need to mix the sugar and the pectin together first, and then add it to our fruit mix. So I'm going to add this in, and make sure it gets all the goods in, and then mix for 3 minutes. Now, you're probably not going to want to watch me stir for 3 minutes. It's probably not the most exciting news on the planet to watch stirring. But for part of that time, you can probably do this with a simple spatula like I am, or probably a whisk might be a little bit better for better consistency. But part of what this is doing is helping the ingredients kind of all come together and make its magic happen. Once this is all done, it's going to sit for a few minutes and you're going to put it in your containers. And that's where everything kind of comes together, and this ends up being magic. So once your stirring is all done, that's kind of a good thing, and we're going to put it into our square containers once it's all stirred together. Now that I'm finishing up stirring, it's about that time where I get to ladle this into my jars, or into my containers. Now, you may notice as this is coming off, it's soupy, and that's just fine. This will thicken up with a little bit of time, but almost like any good cook, we gotta taste it first. So with a very separate and very clean spoon, let's see how it tastes. And remember, it's simply sugar, pectin, and strawberries. 3 ingredients that you know. And oh, I'm excited. Way tasty. And I promise you, this is probably the freshest jam that you're going to have, whether it's the strawberry, the raspberry, or the peach that they offer. This is a great find. And I don't remember who told me about this, but it's a great find. And so with a fresh, clean ladle, I will ladle in approximately 2 pints into my jar. Now remember, or I call it a jar, but my container. Now remember, this container can hold up to 3 servings, or 3 half pints, or a pint and a half total. So, and actually, thankfully, I'm just noticing on my container, there's actually some measure lines that will help me know just how to measure it out. So that is rather helpful. And I only want to do about 2 servings in one and 3 in the other. So it's about equal for what I want to do. Because again, I don't want to be knowing mine, like I'll probably have this all in one sitting if given the opportunity. And that's a bad thing. Now this can be also used in various different things. You can use it on toast or like for breakfast in the morning. You can use it for, I would imagine, like my mom has been talking about jelly-filled donuts. I imagine this would be good as a jelly filling if you wanted to make some fresh donuts. And so there, that is about 3 half pints. Now what I'm going to do, put my lid on it, and I'll probably take a piece of tape, and like I mentioned before with the frozen strawberries, I'll put freezer jam and today's date on this to make sure that it gets used in an appropriate manner. And that's all it is. And now I can just put it right in the freezer. So handy dandy, easy peasy. You just can't go wrong. And you know, I don't know about you, but I'm kind of up for easy. I'm not really up for complicated these days. If you are, go ahead, have fun with complex. But this is a great opportunity to use fresh fruit that's come to you. Now, too, if you are in an area where I heard right that there may be strawberry shortages, figure out what would be the best source for you to use what you have access to. If you don't have a lot of strawberries, this may be a good option for you. If you, or if you want to do frozen, like just cut them up and use them in smoothies, maybe our other avenue is good for you. So realize that you want to be able to use what you can in a way that's going to last you the longest, because we don't want to have others go short, but we want to make sure that we have enough as well. So with that in mind, we're going to finish filling this up, and almost thankfully we have a little bit more than I suspected, which I don't know about you, but I am always grateful for a little bit more than I suspected. But we're gonna kind of clean our bowl a little bit more to get what we can out of it. Ta-da! So now we have 3 containers of our jam. Now, if you want to get all clean and neat, you're more than welcome to clean up your containers to make sure that there's kind of goodness abounding. But for right now, I'm pretty happy with my 3 containers. Now, you'll see that this one's a little fuller than that one, and this one again is full like this one. So this is what we have from our little containers. Now realize that if you've made this along with me, it's not taken all that long. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, up to about 5 servings or 5 containers of preserve, which is kind of nice. And you could, like I said, put it in containers like this or in a little bit smaller. I'd be tentative to put it in glass in your freezer. Because to me, I've had 50-50 luck with glass breaking in the freezer. So you could get glass pints and use the 2-part lid like I showed you before. But I've just found that plastic ends up working better. There's no breakage. There's no problems, because if you put it in a glass jar and you take it out of the freezer and the glass breaks, you can't eat the contents because you don't know if there's any glass in the contents. And so it's always safer to not eat something that has broken glass. So that's why I ended up putting this sort of thing in plastic. If you wanted to put it in plastic bags, if that would be an adventure you'd like to go try, that's a way to go too. But plastic containers are the way to go for these jams. So now that we've gotten through 2 ways to preserve strawberries, I hope this has helped you find another way to kind of stock up on some food that may be of interest to you. Now, there will be other options for us to do some more preservation down the line, but tell me what you started to preserve and stock up to this point. Have you done any strawberry canning or strawberry jams or frozen? What other things have you done to this point? So remember, you always have the opportunity to take care of yourself step by step. And hopefully this has showed you how you can do another way of food preservation. And I'd like to see what your thoughts are on what you've already stocked up on. So leave a comment down below. And remember, hit the subscribe button if you've liked what you've seen. So I hope you have a good day. And thank you for coming to the Traveling Homesteader.